He ruled his world with silence, schedules, and strict control, until a little girl's laugh and a nanny's heart cracked open everything he thought was untouchable. When his daughter said, "Don't you want me to be happy?" he realized control had become a cage. And in the most unexpected way, love walked in, barefoot and smiling. This isn't just a story about parenting. It's a story about breaking walls and finding family in the wreckage. Watch till the end. It'll change how you see love. On the 42nd floor of a steel and glass tower in downtown Chicago, Ethan Calloway ruled his world like a silent emperor. Every inch of his high-rise condo was curated. Charcoal stone countertops, stainless steel appliances, black leather furniture, untouched by fingerprints or childhood smudges. He preferred it that way. Polished, quiet, predictable. From his corner office at Calloway Ventures down to the set of his cufflinks, Ethan lived by one rule: control is survival. But the one thing he couldn't control lived just down the hall: his 6-year-old daughter, Lila. She barely spoke, and when she did, it was in a voice as thin as paper. She'd stopped coloring months ago, her crayons untouched in a drawer. Even her teddy bear Milo, once a constant companion, now rested forgotten on her bookshelf. Her kindergarten teacher had described her as gentle but reserved, which Ethan translated to, "A problem I don't know how to fix." Since Cassandra died, his wife, Lila's mother, life had fractured into two pieces, before and after. Ethan had buried himself in meetings, metrics, and mergers. He provided, he protected, but he no longer knew how to reach the small girl who shared his last name. So he did what he always did when things broke. He hired someone. "I've arranged interviews for the new nanny," said Margot, his executive assistant, sharp and efficient as always. "Top agency, fully vetted." "I want someone firm," Ethan replied, eyes scanning a financial report. "No fluff, no games, routine, discipline. Someone who gets that we're not running a daycare." Margot's voice hesitated ever so slightly. "There is one more candidate. Not from the agency. Came highly recommended, former teacher, background in child psychology, just relocated from San Diego." He glanced at her, brow raised. "She's available immediately," Margot added. "Fine, schedule her. 1-week trial." That evening, Ethan returned home to the sterile comfort of his apartment. Lila was already in her room, curled into the same corner of her bed she always disappeared into. He set down his briefcase, loosened his tie, and checked the time. 7 p.m. The nanny was due any moment. He expected a woman in her 50s, no nonsense, hair in a bun, clipboard in hand. What he got instead was someone very different. The elevator chimed. He pressed the door release from the wall panel and walked toward the entrance. Standing in the warm golden hallway light was a woman in her late 20s, maybe early 30s, with smooth chestnut skin, dark curls pulled into a high puff, and a canvas tote bag slung casually over her shoulder. "Hi there," she said brightly, offering her hand. "I'm Zariah." Ethan blinked. "You're the nanny? Unless you're waiting for someone else with a background in childhood trauma and pancake art." She grinned, unfazed by his frozen expression. He didn't take her hand. "You're not what I expected," he said bluntly. Zariah tilted her head. "Most people aren't. May I come in?" Before he could answer, a small voice echoed from down the hall. "Is that her?" Lila peeked around the corner, bare feet, tangled hair, wide, curious eyes. Zariah smiled immediately, crouching low. "You must be Lila." The girl nodded once, thumbed the edge of her shirt. "I brought something," Zariah said, digging into her tote. She pulled out a small hand puppet shaped like a fox. "This is Frankie. He's really shy, but I told him he'd meet someone brave today." Lila blinked, then took a cautious step forward. Ethan watched the moment with confusion that bordered on discomfort. 1 week, he said to Zariah, cutting through the warmth of the exchange. "Trial basis. No messes. No bedtime negotiations. I expect results." Zariah stood up slowly, not losing her smile. "I'm here for her," she said, gesturing gently to Lila. "Not for your approval." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He returned to his office and shut the door. On the other side, he heard something that hadn't echoed through the apartment in over a year. A giggle. Lila's. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan Calloway realized he wasn't in control anymore. By the third day, Ethan Calloway knew something was wrong, though he couldn't name it. Lila was humming. Not just once, not quietly, repeatedly. A soft, barely there tune floated through the apartment as she colored at the kitchen counter with Zariah, purple crayon dancing across a fresh sheet of paper. The morning sun stretched long fingers across the marble countertops, and something about the entire scene felt off. Or maybe it was that it felt too natural. He stood silently in the hallway, watching through the edge of the kitchen doorframe. Lila's shoulders weren't hunched. Her hair, usually tangled and unattended, was now braided gently down the side. She was laughing. Actually laughing. As Zariah made exaggerated sound effects with the fox puppet Frankie, who now lived permanently in her tote bag. It should have been a relief. But it wasn't. It was unsettling. Because for the first time in months, Lila didn't flinch when someone raised their voice. She didn't cling to Milo the bear like a lifeline. And Ethan had no idea how or why this woman, this stranger, had managed to do what 2 years of expensive therapists and private tutors hadn't. That night, after Zariah had left, Ethan stood outside Lila's room. The door was cracked, the soft glow of her nightlight illuminating her profile. She clutched Frankie instead of Milo. "You okay, Lila?" he asked, his voice stiff from disuse. She looked up, startled, then nodded quickly. "You like Zariah?" She paused, her thumb grazing her bottom lip. "She listens." Ethan blinked. "What do you mean?" "She doesn't tell me I'm sad, she just waits until I'm not." He stood there in silence, unsure how to respond to that. After a few moments, he said, "Good night," and walked away. He didn't sleep. The next day, a meeting ran long and he arrived home an hour earlier than usual. The apartment was filled with music, soft jazz of all things, and the smell of chocolate chip cookies. Zariah was barefoot in the kitchen, apron on, dancing slightly as she stirred the dough. Lila stood on a step stool beside her, adding a pinch of cinnamon, her face lit with delight. They didn't see him. He didn't interrupt. He stood frozen in the shadow of the hallway, something burning in his chest. Not anger, not jealousy. Something more dangerous. Regret. He watched Zariah gently correct Lila's posture with a hand on her shoulder, watched his daughter nod and smile and joke like a child who hadn't spent the last year tucked inside silence. Later that evening, the cookies were neatly stacked on a plate, a glass of milk beside them on the counter. A sticky note in Zariah's handwriting was stuck next to it. "Lila says you need this more than we do." Z. He almost laughed. Almost. Instead, he sat down in the empty kitchen, took a bite, and closed his eyes. They were perfect. 2 days later, he caught himself doing something unthinkable, hesitating before opening the door to his own office. Laughter echoed just beyond it. Lila's voice, high and sweet, braided with Zariah's low hums as they reenacted a scene from The Wizard of Oz with sock puppets. He didn't enter. He turned around and made himself a cup of tea instead. Something was shifting. He knew it. But knowing and admitting were different things. That night, standing once again outside Lila's room, Ethan saw her asleep on the floor inside a tent made from bed sheets and string lights. Frankie sat propped against her pillow. A flashlight was still on beside her, and next to her hand was a small note written in blocky crayon letters. "Dear Daddy, I miss when you used to smile. Love, Lila." He read it twice. Then he folded it and put it in his wallet. It started with a mess, a simple mess. A trail of flour on the hardwood floor. 2 aprons, one tiny, one adult-sized, hung askew on the back of the dining chairs. And on the counter, a lopsided cake, covered in bright pink frosting and far too many sprinkles, waited with all the fragile pride of a child's handmade gift. "Surprise," Lila called, her face beaming as she popped out from behind the kitchen island. Ethan stood at the doorway, briefcase still in hand, exhaustion from a 12-hour board meeting hanging off his shoulders like wet concrete. He didn't smile. "What is this?" Zariah stepped forward, hands flour-dusted, wiping them on a towel. "Lila wanted to bake something special. For you." "For me?" His voice was flatter than he intended. "And this is what you thought was appropriate?" Lila's smile faltered. "It's just a little mess," Zariah said gently. "We were going to clean up right after dinner." "I didn't ask for surprises," Ethan cut in, voice rising slightly. "I asked for structure, for control, and now this place looks like a kindergarten art room," exploded. Lila's bottom lip trembled. "But I thought, maybe you'd be happy." He turned to her, slower than he meant to. "You thought wrong." The silence afterward was unbearable. Lila's small face crumpled. "You don't like anything I do." "Lila." Zariah stepped toward her, but it was too late. The girl turned and ran, her socked feet sliding slightly on the polished floor as she disappeared down the hallway. Her bedroom door slammed with a finality that echoed louder than Ethan's words. The cake sat untouched. Zariah looked at him then, really looked at him. Not with anger, but with something deeper. Sadness. "I didn't mean to undermine your rules," she said softly. "I just wanted her to feel like a child again, to feel safe." "She is safe," Ethan replied. But even he didn't believe it. "Safe isn't just locks and checklists, Ethan," she said. "It's softness. It's being able to make a mess without fear. It's being allowed to try, even if it ends up crooked or sticky or imperfect." Her voice shook slightly, not from fear, but from restraint. "You say you want structure," she continued, "but what you're building isn't structure. It's a cage, and you're locking her inside it because you're afraid to open the door yourself." That landed like a punch. "I think it's best I go," she said, after a beat of silence. He blinked. "Go?" Zariah nodded. "Tonight?" "You're overreacting," he said too quickly. She gave a sad smile. "You're the only one who doesn't see how much your daughter has changed these last 2 weeks. How she glows when she paints, how she laughs when I read her stories in silly voices, how she reaches for your hand and then flinches when you pull away." Ethan stared at the floor. "I care about her," Zariah said. "Enough to leave if staying is hurting more than helping." She moved toward the hall to collect her things, but paused at the entrance. "I know you love her. I can see it. But love without warmth isn't something kids understand. It doesn't feel like love." And then she was gone. The apartment felt wrong without her. The air, once filled with quiet joy, was stale, hollow. He walked slowly to the counter, placed a hand on the edge of the cake tin. The frosting was messy, lumpy, a little burnt on one side, and perfect. He sat down, the silence swallowing him. Across the room, a crayon drawing hung crooked on the fridge. It was a stick figure scene. Lila in the middle, holding hands with a tall man labeled Daddy and a woman with curly hair labeled Z. All of them were smiling. He hadn't even noticed when she'd taped it there. Now, it felt like the only thing that mattered. The night stretched on long after the apartment had gone silent. Ethan sat in his office, staring at the papers in front of him. The numbers blurred on the page. The contracts, the deadlines, the meetings, none of it mattered now. The overwhelming sense of failure, of cold emptiness, was heavier than any financial report he had ever faced. His phone buzzed on the desk. A message from his sister. "How's Lila? I haven't heard from you in days. Are you still planning to attend the dinner next week?" He stared at the screen for a long moment. The last time he'd seen her, he had been too distracted, too caught up in work, to listen to her little anecdotes about school, too focused on efficiency to see the softness in her smile. His thumb hovered over the phone, but he set it down. He didn't know how to fix what he'd broken. It was just after midnight when he found himself standing in the hallway, staring at the door to Lila's room. His feet felt like lead as he stepped toward it, every step more reluctant than the last. He knocked lightly, then paused. Inside, the dim glow of a nightlight illuminated the edges of the room. He could hear her soft breaths, the slow rhythm of sleep that felt miles away from the chaos he had created. "Leela?" His voice cracked before he could stop it. Her small voice came from the other side, tentative and small. "Yes, Daddy?" He swallowed, his heart aching in his chest. "Can I come in?" There was a long pause before the door creaked open. Lila stood in the doorway, clutching her stuffed bear, her eyes still wide and bright with unshed tears. Ethan's heart clenched as he knelt down in front of her. "Hey, sweetie," he whispered, reaching out for her. "I'm sorry." Lila blinked, confused. "Sorry for what?" "For not being the daddy you needed," he said, his voice low. "For not seeing you, for pushing you away when you were just trying to make me smile." The words felt foreign on his tongue, like they didn't belong to him. But they were true. He had tried so hard to build something secure for her, to keep her safe, that he hadn't realized how far he'd gone in the opposite direction. Lila climbed into his lap, and for a moment, the world seemed to slow. She nestled against him, her tiny body fitting against his chest like it always had. "I'm sorry, too," she said softly, her voice muffled by his shirt. "I just wanted you to laugh. I wanted you to be happy." Ethan's chest tightened. He felt something break inside of him, a dam he hadn't known was there. "I know, baby, I know," he murmured, holding her tightly. "And I promise you, I'm going to try harder. I'm going to be the dad you deserve. You won't have to try to make me smile anymore. I'll do it myself." She pulled away slightly, studying his face. "Do you still want me to make a mess?" Ethan chuckled through the lump in his throat. "Only if you promise to make it with love." Lila's face brightened and she nodded. "Okay, I promise." Just then, a knock on the door. Ethan turned to see Zariah standing in the doorway. Her face was soft but tired. Her eyes met his, searching, waiting for some kind of acknowledgement. "I'm sorry," he said quietly to her, the words still unfamiliar but no longer impossible. "For everything." Zariah stepped inside the room slowly, cautiously. "You don't have to apologize to me, Ethan." He stood up, his hands shaky as he lifted Lila back into bed. "I do. I was wrong. You were right. She needed you. She needed someone who knows how to bring joy into a room, and I didn't know how." Zariah's gaze softened. "It's okay. No one's perfect." He took a step toward her. "But I need you to know that I want to be better. For Lila. For us." Zariah hesitated for a moment before nodding. "I'm here for as long as you'll let me stay. If you're willing to try, then I'll try too." Ethan nodded, his chest lifting with a small weight, one that hadn't been there before. The walls he had built around himself and his daughter, built with the intent of keeping the world out, had begun to crumble. And for the first time, he felt a weight lifted off his chest, one that had been there for far too long. The sound of Lila's soft breathing was the only thing that filled the room, but it wasn't oppressive. It was comforting. For the first time, Ethan realized that this was what had been missing all along. The simplicity of being human, of being a father, of letting his daughter be a child. "I'm going to make things right," he whispered to the quiet of the room. He meant it, and somewhere deep in his chest, he knew that this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. The days that followed didn't unfold with grand gestures or dramatic declarations. There was no sweeping transformation overnight, no magical return to a fairy tale version of parenting. But something had shifted, quietly, undeniably. Ethan Parker began to listen, not with half an ear while scrolling through his tablet, but fully, deliberately. He started his mornings earlier, not to read reports, but to pour cereal beside Lila and ask her about her dreams. Some mornings she shrugged, still groggy and slow to speak. Other mornings she painted vivid stories about flying bunnies and dancing clouds. Ethan listened to them all, and most of all, he stayed. He didn't just drop in on moments anymore. He lived in them. One Saturday morning, Zariah found him and Lila sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by crayons, markers, and construction paper. The hardwood floors he once demanded stay spotless now bore streaks of pink and green, and his crisp shirt sleeves were rolled up, stained faintly with glitter glue. Zariah leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching them. Lila held up a drawing. "This is me, and this is Daddy, and this is you," she said, pointing to 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a crooked sun. Ethan looked up, and when he met Zariah's gaze, he didn't look away. "She said we needed a picture for the fridge. I didn't argue." Zariah's lips curved into a smile. "Looks like it belongs there." It did. That evening, Ethan suggested a walk to the little park 3 blocks down, a place he had never visited, despite living just a short elevator ride above it. They walked slowly, hand in hand. Lila ran ahead at times, skipping toward the playground, but always circling back to reach for one of their hands again. Ethan glanced sideways at Zariah. "Do you ever think about how much time we waste thinking we're protecting the people we love, when all we're doing is pushing them away?" Zariah didn't answer right away. She was watching Lila climb onto the monkey bars, her face glowing with joy. "I think it's human to want control, especially after loss, but love doesn't live in control." Ethan exhaled, nodding slowly. "I wish I had known that sooner." "You know it now." They sat on a park bench for a long time. No agenda, no plan, just the hush of the wind in the trees and the bursts of laughter from children playing. Ethan reached for Zariah's hand. This time, she didn't pull away. Back at the apartment that night, the air felt lighter. Zariah baked banana bread with Lila while Ethan cleaned the living room, something he once outsourced without a thought. There was no mess he couldn't handle now, not when the laughter that came with it filled every inch of the space that had once been so sterile. Later, after Lila had fallen asleep, curled between her favorite stuffed animals, cheeks still flushed from excitement, Ethan and Zariah stood on the balcony, watching the city breathe beneath them. "I always thought I had to choose," he admitted, "between being successful and being soft, between order and love, between protecting Lila and letting her feel free." Zariah looked over at him. "Turns out, you can do both." He chuckled softly, eyes misting in the glow of the skyline. "Turns out I was the one who needed saving." She stepped closer, her voice quiet. "So, what happens now?" Ethan turned to face her fully. "Now we build. With joy, with love, with a little glitter on the walls if that's what it takes." Zariah laughed, the sound filling the cool night air. "I'll bring the glitter." 2 months later, the fridge was now an art gallery of lopsided hearts, rainbows, and 3-person families. There were still checklists on the counters, but next to them were sticky notes with lunchbox jokes and grocery lists in Lila's shaky handwriting. The living room still had a rug, but it was often hidden beneath pillow forts and toy castles. The home didn't run perfectly, but it ran with warmth. One evening, as Lila lay dozing on the couch, wrapped in her favorite blanket, Ethan placed a light kiss on her forehead and whispered, "You're safe, you're seen, and you are so, so loved." He stood up and turned to find Zariah watching from the kitchen doorway. "I was wrong before," he said. "About what?" she asked softly. "I thought love was about protection, but it's really about presence." Zariah walked toward him, and this time, when she reached for his hand, she didn't let go. And this time, he didn't need walls to feel safe. Because what stood in the place of his fortress was something infinitely more powerful. A family. What is the lesson of this story? 1. Control is not connection. You can build the most perfect life on the outside and still be lonely. True connection starts when you let go of control and let love in, even when it's messy. 2. Children don't need perfection, they need presence. What children remember isn't how spotless the home was or how rigid the rules were. They remember who listened, who laughed with them, and who made them feel seen. 3. Love softens walls that grief hardens. Sometimes we mistake control for healing, but healing often comes from laughter, messes, and letting someone in when it's scariest. 4. You don't have to have it all figured out to be a good parent or partner. You just have to be willing to show up, even when you're still learning. What do you think about this story? Let's comment below to discuss. And don't forget to subscribe our channel to listen to more interesting stories.